assessors really play a really important role in building a GIS program. A lot of you are, small communities who don't necessarily have a GIS person on staff, and it's, ad hoc. Somebody does, some piece, somebody does another piece. But I really feel assessors, because parcel data is the foundation of so much of the GIS, it lands on assessors. So I'm going to bring Ginny and Jen in and ask them for their experience as far as building the GIS program. Ginny, of course, we've been working with her for so long with Manchester. And I think, Ginny, maybe you can describe to us and share with the audience your role at Manchester and how you kind of grew into becoming the GIS manager ad hoc.
So back in 2002, we were looking to go with GIS. And of course, I was the one that brought it to the town administrator's attention that it was something up and coming and we really should work on it and get a lot of layers on it and get all the departments involved. And so we had AppGeo, which back then was AGI, I think, or something like that. Do a needs assessment for us. And what that is they come in and they talk to all the different department heads and see what the GIS could do for that department and what that department actually did for the town. So that, and they put together this big report for us. After that, after the needs assessment, we had we did a needs assessment and an implementation plan. And then we started adding layers. We add layers on a yearly basis usually, and there's always something new coming up. We have many layers now. I've been told by many people that our GIS site is one of the best because of all the information that we have in our community. The people in the community really appreciate it also and use it a lot.
Yeah, and I think over the years, what's curious is that, you have been great about bringing in DPW or, the conservation agent and said, okay, what is it that we can do and build those layers and do that analytics that's needed. Jen, what's your experience been? I think you had a similar experience at Grafton.
I did, actually. I was there when they implemented GIS for the first time, and I mean, it was like night and day for us. So, we were doing the same thing, really, just begging and borrowing for data anywhere we could get it, because we were just so excited at the prospects of being able to have these visual references, both for the community and for ourselves, as we then we're going to apply it and we're going to discuss further on in our day-to-day job. It was amazing.
That's basically, it sounds great, but I feel like it's a far cry from, let's go to the next slide, Rebecca, from what we were doing before GIS, right? Jen, what was your experience? I think before getting the GIS, what were you doing?
So actually in Grafton, I started as a part-time clerk. And so I was doing all of the abutters lists and physically taking maps and photocopying them on a copy machine and taping them together and drawing radiuses and then typing up lists of abutters and then copying those to distribute. So everything was just done so very manually, and of course we didn't have the additional layers that we could refer to as far as, aerials and imagery like that. So, I mean, everything was just manual, trying to assign parcel numbers. You didn't know if it was going to fall on the next map. You had no comprehensive view, of the community when you were doing these things.
So Ginny, did you also have similar experiences? I mean, I imagine that I'm hoping that a lot of communities are already, past this stage, but did you have a similar experience?
So I started in the assessing world back in 1985. I've been around for 36 years now. So, but 26 of it here in Manchester. Back then, same thing as Jen was doing. Everything was manual. It took you forever. I mean, we used to have to type up, like personal property bills and everything. I mean, who uses a typewriter nowadays? And we've gone from, doing that, coloring in neighborhood maps. You had to do it by hand. And those are required to go to the Department of Revenue on your recertification years. And it took a lot of time. You'd have one of the clerks in the office, get out their colored pencils and start coloring in based on the information for those areas. Same thing with, zoning maps and things like that. I mean, now all the maps are up on the GIS, and people can do so many things with them. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I guess GIS saves the day.
Yes.
Rebecca, next slide, if you please, thanks. So now we're sort of in the modern era, and doing all of this so easily. I don't know. I mean, Ginny, could you elaborate on what all you do with GIS on a daily basis? I mean, I can imagine a abutters list is probably the most common.
Yep, abutters list, looking for when we're reviewing to do values and things like that, reviewing neighborhood, your neighborhood codes and making sure there's not like one in the wrong place, coded wrong or something like that, finding discrepancies in lot sizes, which I'm actually reviewing now that my maps have been updated. Checking to find out and correct any of the problems that we have between what the GIS is telling us and what I am assessing them for. So I'm using it. I mean, even more than that, when we were getting ready to update our maps this year, you're able to go in and you're able to mock up the maps yourself. So I was able to show you some of the changes that I was looking to have done that I didn't necessarily have a plan for, but I could mark it and tell you. That was great this year to be able to do that. I have townspeople that, are called to have research done and things like that. And I just have them go to we have an advanced search on the GIS now.
Which I'll be talking about a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, and people can go in and do their own research, which saves us a lot of time to be doing other things in the office. And over the years, when you seem to lose an employee, you never seem to get to replace that employee again. So you have less employees doing more work. So it's great when you have the ability to go in the GIS and just find things fast. You can. Right. I go in it daily.
Jen, what about you? I mean, how have you found it helpful on a daily basis in Milford?
Every day. Not a day goes by that we aren't in there. Routine things like verifying property size, frontage, getting deeds in, and we're looking at our property record card and we've got a variance in acreage. Looking at dimensional requirements for zoning. Overlaying those layers to see if they meet the requirements, minimum lot size, things like that. Visual aids for discovering things like detached structures, patios, things that have been added that you don't know about, solar panels, pools, garages, sheds, right, and the like. Another thing we like to do is really look at, when we're analyzing our land value, is looking at things that can influence that, like easements or wetlands, relative relation, closeness to railroads and water features, recreation, conservation, and where they, in reference to the school systems or the schools buildings, utilities, are they available for the lots as well? So a lot of land features that we look at.
So it's a lot of digging in and, and having all these data layers available to you at your fingertips so that you can make that assessment or that evaluation and get it right. So that's how it's really been advanced. I think, Rebecca, do you have a poll? I'd love to get a sense from all of you. What, are you using GIS on a daily basis for your assessing tasks? If you can get that poll going. I see a few people have answered. Give me a couple, I think like 15 seconds before it ends. Okay, interesting. I'd really be curious because I think there are a few people who are saying that I think the results, I'm going to just share them. Does it stop? Okay. There are a few people who do not use GIS on a daily basis. And I'm just curious to know, what is it that what are the barriers that prevent you from using GIS for your assessing tasks? So, it would be interesting to know, and then we can address it and talk about it here as well. If there are things that prevent you from using GIS. Maybe it's not on a daily basis, maybe use it occasionally, but I'd be curious to know. Rebecca, can we see those? I guess maybe I need to look at it here.
So I've stopped sharing the poll. So if anybody has any barriers that they're not able to use GIS on a daily basis, you can put that in our Q&A box, and we can look at some of those answers and talk to some of those.
Great, okay.
So we can give people a couple minutes, 30 seconds to put in any questions.
So do you feel like you don't have enough layers to do some of this work, or is it not convenient for you, or what are the barriers that are that are causing you, or maybe you need training? I mean, it could be anything that often people are just not familiar with the interface, or want more information. So whatever the barriers are, if you could share them. So we'll address it as we go along. Let's go to the next slide. I really find that aerial imagery, and we all know the whole landscape for aerial imagery has really grown exponentially in the last few years, and we've got access to high resolution imagery. This was something that was always such a expensive and difficult thing to do in the past, but now it's really become much easier. What's your experience been with it? Because Ginny, you have a lot of aerial imagery, and I think you felt like it was really helpful for you this last year.
Yeah, COVID kind of prevented any in-person inspections because you couldn't go to people's houses. You weren't supposed to go anywhere or do anything.
Yep.
Work from home. So I was using my near map. I get 3 flyovers a year. And of course, the best one to use is always the one with the no leaves on. So,
Yep.
usually in the spring.
Right.
And I would have, the near map images up on one screen and my Patriot database up on my other screen. And I was able to, compare photos from previous ones to see changes. I was able to do inspections. I also was using MLS listings to do inspections. When you have all those things now available to you, and you get updated flyovers on a regular basis, you're able to compare and see changes that are made on properties. And that just saved me last year doing all of my inspections. I was able to do them online. So
Jen, do you also use your imagery extensively?
I do use it extensively. I actually just did a demo with Nearmap too, to see what that was all about. But we've got a couple of different years. We've got like 19, 15. So we really like to get another one, now.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I use it a lot. I use it a lot for, to see what site work was done, or with my elevations for topography and that sort of thing.
I mean, I know that there are several of you who use oblique imagery as well and find that very handy. So, the pictometry plugin that we have. So if you have a pictometry subscription, we can give you that plugin on MapGeo. But I think all of this is just sort of telling you how powerful it is for, I think every task that a local government needs, but also especially for assessment. And then next slide, Rebecca. I think another thing that this is sort of foundational is correcting errors and anomalies. And I think that's one piece that all of you are now familiar with. I mean, when we first did your parcel automation, a lot of this came out at the time is, okay, what are these things that we don't have? They're not assessed at all. And, we have it on our map, or the land is out there. So I think correcting those anomalies have, I'm sure, been really helpful. Jen, you have a specific layer on your MapGeo site for this purpose?
We do. We have it's kind of a mismatch report that shows us visually outliers or our extremes, especially that have a difference in the polygon area, and comparing that to our assessment area that we're actually basing our values off of. We've had quite a few discrepancies, and over the couple of years that I've started with this layer, I've been able to clean up a lot of them. Some of them were quite significant, and how else would you see that, without
Right.
having a tool like this that kind of pops it out there, because you guys have given us that land area as a shape, and we've got the land area for the value, and something's very wrong.
And I think, Ginny, you have like these massive tracts of land that you've been trying to figure out what's going on with them, right?
Yes, we had an area that was about 190 acres of land that we had no idea who owned it. So I've had somebody doing title research for me, and we've been able to, especially this year, that was a lot of the markups that I did was, now that we know who owns these particular parcels, and majority of them now are we found out what town owned, they would take in tax title, because it was what they used to call woodlots. People would own a piece of woodland that they would be, when before heat came along years ago, and they would all go to their piece of land and cut down trees to burn to stay warm in their houses. That's how far back it goes. And we had two areas of mapping also that they called map 98, map 99, that we had no idea where these parcels fit in. So we're definitely cleaning up a lot of that. And AppGeo has been very helpful with that too, showing it as a layer for us to look at. So.
And so next slide, Rebecca. This is sort of, giving you this landscape of all of the stuff that, assessors do. But I think what I know we put this in the title, but I think having that parcel data and the assessor's connection to all the other departments is so critical. I know that both of you work with, your building department, your clerks. What has your experience been with, sharing the data with these different departments and getting more out of it? Jen, what's your experience been?
I work with most of the departments that you have listed there, especially our DPW department actually has a separate GIS that they use on their own. They kind of like to be a little bit more independent, but again, they use it for plow routes and, all the likes like that. Right now, we're very heavy working with the town clerk's office with re-precincting. We also worked with them quite extensively with voter registrations, being able to take the little guy and walk down the street and actually look at mailboxes and say, well, it's supposed to be a 2-family, but there's 4 mailboxes,
Yeah, Ginny, you've also worked, closely with your DPW and with your, other, conservation agent in town.
Well, I also oversee the building department,
Right.
so that I work with the GIS a lot. So the building department, very strong. The building inspector, is able to go in and look at these properties. He hasn't been in the office here since COVID. He works full-time in another office, and he's able to do all of his stuff without even having to come into town hall. He's able to sit at his computer,
right,
look at the maps, look at, where things are on the map. The town clerk, the real thing that they use it for was the voter. This past year, we added on the voter locations and how long it would take to walk to, the school to vote or whatever, and how long it would take to drive so that people would know, where they were going. DPW, yes, definitely is involved with it a lot. We've done a lot with DPW. We have cemetery layers now that show who owns the plots and all of that, which has been a big project. Priya will attest to that. It's been a lot of work, but it's going along very well. We're trying to get up all of our ancient cemeteries and things like that. Planning and zoning, they use it all the time. We have a town planner. She has been working from home since COVID started. So she comes in once in a great while, but not very often. And she's able to work with developers, looking at certain areas and, what do you think would fit in this area and things like that. So it's been great and I have to say that our conservation department uses it all the time.
In Milford, Jen, you and the planner kind of work really closely together on. Essentially, you're the two people who manage the GIS. So that's really another key piece, and I think the point that I want to make here is that it is your parcel data, and it is your, the information associated with the parcel data that is key for all these departments to know, what is the, what's the ownership information and what is the assessment information. So I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is it's really key that your data is really important. Rebecca, next slide. So what I want to get into now is, talking about geoanalytics, and this is something that we do at AppGeo, is, analyzing and visualizing data that has location, and then looking at it through a spatial lens. And, we attempt to expose these spatial patterns and, answering the where questions. So what are the types of geoanalytics? Next slide. So, there are two ways of looking at this. Either you can explore your data, or you can ask a question. So, if you don't have a specific question in mind, and you're just sort of looking at your data and exploring it, which is what, a lot of you assessors do, sort of looking to see if there are patterns. And then also looking at it from the perspective of what can I do with this data and how is it structured? But if you had a particular question in mind, then you have to frame that question, and then you have to figure out if you have the data to answer that question. And again, is the data structured for that question? And then, of course, needless to say, who is asking the question? Is it the assessor? So are you asking the question? Is it somebody from another department who's asking that question of the assessor? Or is it the public who's asking that question? So I think all these ways of approaching geoanalytics are important to think about, and I'll get into them a little bit more. I think we've got a question. The next, is it the next slide? Or maybe, yeah, it's the following slide. Okay, so when we're looking at exploratory, so essentially what we're trying to do here is get into the spatial thinking exercise. You start by exploring your data, or what might exist, and what you can group geographically. Example, you can group the parcels by house type. What is a different kind of a house doing in this neighborhood? Sort of looking at it, and I'll show you a few examples about this. So aggregating the data by some unit of geography kind of shows you trends, and it also helps you clean up your data if you find any anomalies or things out of place. So I think the next slide is answering a question. So this is, what is your question? What data is needed, and will the data, your data work for this query, are basically the questions that you're thinking about. I just want to throw out another poll question, and if you can answer it, the next slide, Rebecca. Just think about what questions do you hear the most. So, based on what the conversation we've had so far as assessors, or as other people in local governments, what does the public ask you most often? And what does that what would you wish for that you would have the answer for it? So if you could put your response to this in the Q&A, it'll be great, so that we can address some of these ideas. I'll give you a minute to throw out, what is it that you hear from the public? Is there something that they're asking for? And, you have to then give them the answer, and how do you come about that answer? And I think we touched upon some of these while we were talking all this time. And I'll give you a little hint. I know that, we're going to talk about it, but Jen brought this up, is a lot of people come in to ask about abatements, and, how do they get the information to justify that challenge or that claim? Okay, so, the questions and that's one example is, you have people coming in to say, why was my property assessed this way? And how do I get to that, to the answer of, why was it assessed this way? So next slide, Rebecca.
Before we move on, I know that Bill put in a chat one of the questions that he gets.
Yeah. Where do I find sales that are similar to my home so I can assure my assessment is correct? And that's a perfect question. Thanks, Bill, because that's what you need. You can use your GIS and your parcel data to answer that question. And what that's doing is it's literally filtering your data. It's filtering, it's putting this query in saying, show me all these parcels that have, and I know that I am living in a single family home and I have a ranch style home. So, okay, show me all these properties. And then you go to yours and then you can see what are the other ones that are similar to mine, and then look at the assessment and how they are assessed. So that's really the question, and you can direct these people, your citizens to the GIS to answer these questions and not have to deal with them yourself. Thanks, Rebecca. So I'm going to sort of dive into some of these examples. These are some examples from Connecticut. So I know a lot of you Massachusetts clients might find this, a little unusual way of doing it, but this was in West Hartford. We did some work for the assessor in West Hartford who was trying to do his reval, and also look for patterns and anomalies in his data and pick them out and see why that was the case. So, in this case, what we did was we symbolized the parcels by neighborhood code, but then we put a label with the value of the house and a house style, a number. So, this is the way he wanted symbolized. So there are many ways of doing it. Let's go to the next slide, Rebecca. You can do the same thing by putting in, a different style for the style of the house. So, it's a different symbology. But I think he preferred the style with the labels because he could then pick it out and then dig deeper. And this is what, Jen was talking about, is like, you dig deeper when you find an anomaly. You say, okay, why is it this way? Why is this particular house assessed at this value, and is it correct that it actually is a different style? And in that case, do I need to adjust the assessment? And of course, I'm just looking at the surface. I'm sure as assessors, you look at several more things, but at least this gives you one level of a check. I don't know, Jen, if you want to dive in here and address that.
That's the first clue, right? Mm-hmm. It stands right out at you. It jumps out at you and it says, look at me, there's something wrong here. Why is this? Or maybe not, but maybe their septic failed and you've got an adjustment on there, or there's some temporary reason why that value should be higher or lower. But you don't know until you go looking. A lot of the information that we find here in Milford is we wouldn't know there was a problem if we didn't have the visual clue that there was one. So that's how we use this tool the most here for a lot of the projects that we do, and with abatements especially, because, and for the public especially, like you were talking about, this is a huge tool for them, because a lot of times they're filing for an abatement, but they don't really know why, and they really don't know that their value is whether it's in line or not, they just don't like their taxes. So this is a way to show them the data behind how it's based, and that it is in fact equal to or fair and equitable with their similar like properties.
Right. Yeah. So next slide, Rebecca. So this is what I was talking about, aggregation, and here I've just given you a view of symbolizing by your land value. And as you can see, the scale there shows you the breakdown of land values, and that can be aggregated however you like. And this way also you can look for patterns, you can look for discrepancies if there's something popping out, and that's the visual clue again for you to find these discrepancies or look for patterns. The next slide shows you that you can actually do this. You can actually do this on any field in your CAMA data, and I know that by itself it might not be very informative, but if you look at it in relation to one another and doing a query on filtering the data, that really gives you a complete picture of what you might want. And I think assessment ratios are really important to you from what I've learned, and that's something that we can also calculate and symbolize for you, because that's giving you that context to get the information that you need about the parcel. Next slide. So now looking at the whole answering the question and why did only my assessed value increase? This is old information, but it's still relevant. I think in the assessor in West Hartford, he really wanted to be very transparent and share this information with the citizens. So they had these large maps and they had these meetings where people could come and get their questions answered. And we symbolized maps for him, which were showing the the reval impact, and we symbolized it by percent change. And we looked, and you could look to see what has changed and what's the extent of the change. And then he would give you a reason as to why that happened. And I think going back to the next slide, Rebecca. Going back to that same example of that property that I was showing earlier, what was it that caused that that increase? And I think once you dig into the information as to what was what's near it, why does it fall into this neighborhood code, you can justify it to the citizen and explain it to them as to why their assessed value increased. So the next slide I think is for I'm going to do a quick swap with you, Rebecca, to share my screen. Hopefully I can pull up the okay. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is something that we've actually done for the town of Milford for Jen, and it is it's a somewhat of work in progress is what I would say, because I think this depends on what you as an assessor want out of it and what you think would be beneficial to your audience. And so what we've done is we've actually pulled out, and if I go back to this is how your your typical MapGeo site looks. It'll take a minute to load. But what we did was we actually pulled out, and this is something that I learned from another assessor from Bill Mitchell in North Andover, that what you are interested in is the sales from the last 2 years. So what we did was we actually pulled out we queried out data which had just the last 2 years sales. And so that's what this theme is showing you: properties sold after 7/1/2018. So you can actually see clearly which are those properties. And now what this data view is doing is that it is searching just on those properties from the sales in the last 2 years. So what you can do is you can go into the search feature, and I'm just going to clear this out. You can add any of the fields that you want to do this analysis on. But say I want to look for the properties that are 101, that's your single family homes, and it shows me all the single family homes. There's a little one little step that you got to do so that it loads all the single family homes. So now at this point, I'm just looking at all the 101 properties. And say I want to now further refine that search, and I want to add in the style of the home. So I can put in, my Cape, and I want to filter by that. So now you can see all the results for the single family homes that are Capes. And at this point, I mean, of course, you can add in more filters if you wanted, because this is it's an additive search. But at this point, you can always go in and look at the search results, and at this point do an exploratory searching. Is my assessment ratio off for some reason? Do I need to look at it in the context of any of the other themes that I have on my neighborhoods? Are they set up correctly? Is there something that I need to adjust here? And I'm sure you have the next steps, and you can also download this information. The results of the search are downloadable, as are all your other searches. So this is another way of analyzing the data and giving you that information that you want right off the bat, by doing this refined search. And again, I know, in the case of Ginny, she had this advanced search a long time back, even on the custom site that we had. But it was very hard to, it's very hard to explain to the public that this is what they can do to get that information. So it all depends on what you want to share with them, and how you can help them get this information themselves instead of you're providing it to them. And again, we can add in as many of these fields as you want, or keep them minimal so that you can just get the basic or the high level information that you want instead of getting it too complicated. So that's another, I feel, a really key way of doing geoanalytics is filtering the data, doing this advanced search, and bringing it down to the results that you really are interested in. And of course, we can